Hello and welcome back to the eighth lecture on debate. It's nice to have you here. Um, uh, so today we're gonna learn how to do a prime minister speech. Now, I was a little bit hesitant to make this video because, first of all, I already gave a brief analysis and brief briefing on how to give all of the speaker roles in AP debate. And I've also made separate lectures on how to give arguments and rebuttals and characterization and stuff. Not characterization, actually. So I wasn't super sure if I should make this video because you can just watch those videos and then get an idea. But I would just like to explain it a bit more in detail. So a prime minister. First of all, from the name prime minister, it comes from a government role, but it doesn't really have to do much with that. What it is really is the first speaker of the proposition, so we call that first prop. How you're likely going to start the speech is start with a hook. Now, a hook can be good for some reasons. It catches the attention, and you're the face of the debate and the beginning of the speaker, a beginning of your own team and the debate. So to catch the attention of the audience, this is something that is useful to do. How to do a hook is obviously just like an essay hook. Say anything that is catchy enough, anything that will catch the attention. You can start with a starking example. You can start with a statement that is controversial. Anything that catches the attention, and it's fine. Although I would say a hook isn't mandatory. Because, for example, if you're doing an essay, a hook is definitely mandatory. If you're doing a speech, a hook is even more mandatory. But if you're doing a debate, the more important goal is to just win the debate by winning, by having better material. So a hook may increase your own speaker scores, and it may just bring the vibes towards your team, but it's not necessarily going to help you win the debate. So if you can think of a good hook, definitely do it. If you don't really want to do it, then you don't need to. But I would advise if you're a prime minister, since you're starting the debate, just to look good. You kind of should. Next is the introduction, which gets a bit vague here because there are many stuff that you can do, and it also depends on the types of the motion. But the general rule is that you need to frame the debates and characterize the debates. Now, basically, what this is you talk about the wording that is inside of the motion or the context of why the motion is here. You talk about those stuff in a way that benefits your side. So how are we going to either define or characterize what this wording in the motion looks like? And obviously, when you're doing that, you need to explain that in a way that helps your own team. And this also is generally important for many types of motions. But the reason that I say this is it's a bit vague is because many framing and characterization is actually going to happen in your arguments anyway. And I personally think that if you want to do most of your framing in introduction, that's fine. But I would just do it in your arguments because it gets a bit weird if you like characterize for 3 minutes in the top of your speech, and then in your arguments you just go, "Hey, we already characterized X in our introduction, so I'm gonna move on." That's a bit weird for me, and it's also a bit weird to characterize some stuff in the intro and some stuff in the argument. So that does get a bit weird. So what I do as a prime minister is it is also very weird to just skip this entirely. So you would just characterize a little bit, or just anything depending on motion. But for example, if you have a narrative motion when this house believes that this narrative is good or bad, then you're going to still want to characterize like the narrative and how it's supposed to look like. And what ends up happening more than just a plain and obvious trite characterization is what this debate is about. What it is about and what it's not about. So this will discuss how to prioritize what happens inside of the motion. And this what you be talking about what arguments or I guess clashes or I guess impacts are most important in the debate, and you're going to say what is not important. It's not only that, but you're also interpreting the motion. For example, if the motion is this house would ban smoking, then the burden of the props team is not just to prove why smoking is generally bad, but why the federal government should ban that and why that should be implemented in the real world. For example, you would want to push that. That is something you cannot really do in an argument. That is something you should do in framing. And any smart stuff that you want to say should really be in framing and characterization too. Uh, what you should do here is if it's a Diels-Wood motion, it's called a policy motion. This is called modeling. So in this case, you need to explain what your policy is. What is the law that you want to implement? If the motion is about making voting mandatory, this House would make voting mandatory. Then what does your policy of making voting mandatory mean? For example, what is the punishment when people don't vote? Or how are you going to enforce people to vote? These type of modeling stuff should be in a Diels-Wood motion. Similarly, if the motion is worded, this House believes that X should, that is also a policy motion, and you should also do modeling. Now, it is sometimes appropriate and sometimes not for the thing I'm going to talk about right now. It's characterization of the world. But I would still recommend it in most cases. So when you're not able to do modeling, in modeling, you have this something called a fiat power. So the policy that you make is going to pass in the parliament. But when it's not modeling and when it's not a policy motion, and if it's a value motion, and you characterizing your own worlds doesn't get any fiat power, which means that it may not be realized. So when it's not these type of motions, then you can characterize your own world and what's going to happen if the motion passes or falls. But you have to describe it in a way where you're not guaranteed that it will happen, so you need to explain why it is likely to happen. And you can do these stuff in the introduction. If you're a bit confused, it's not that important. I mean, hot take, I guess. Many people say it's important, and if you're in the elites level, it is definitely important. But if you're beginning and you're able to do this in the argument anyway, just do the arguments. And argument 1 and 2, you should probably do 2 in most scenarios. I already made argument lectures, so I think you can watch that anyway. And any other tips that I have for the arguments is just apart from the argument lecture, you can check that out, is, I guess, preemptions. So there are prime minister speeches where you include preemptions at the introduction. I would not really recommend this unless you want to. I mean, if you want to, you can. But if you are able to integrate that in your 2 arguments, that's even better. So, if you're weighing against the initial argument inside of the first argument, then you're able to integrate that in your argument part of the speech. And I think that's how it works. Conclusion, you don't really need to do it for conclusion. But if you will do it, just summarize your speech and just throw in something impactful or ask a question to the other team. That generally works. And that's the Prime Minister. Thank you.